Hello and welcome to a Sat-Lodge TV special. As the fallout surrounding the Pakistan-India situation reaches yet another trough in relations between these two nuclear-armed countries, to discuss the potential implications on both a local and global scale, and indeed to explore potential long-term solutions to the problem, I'm joined today by Congressman Trent Franks. Now, Congressman Franks' achievements have included a long and successful spell as a key member of the US government, with a focus on highlighting human rights and religious freedoms, particularly in India. More recently, he's become a board member of the Kalistan Caucus Foundation and has become a powerful and vocal supporter of Sikh rights across the world. Congressman Franks, welcome and thanks so much for joining us.
Well, Angus, it's always wonderful to be with you, sir. I always enjoy coming on with you.
Always a pleasure. Now, Congressman Franks, let me start with a controversial question, a question that has in fact been on the lips of many commentators on all sides. Do you think the so-called Pahalgam terrorist attack could have been an Indian false flag operation?
Well, you know, Angus, India has been accused of false flag operations before, and these types of tactics can be especially insidious, especially if they're used to falsely implicate someone else and critically in a situation of this magnitude. And the truth is, I don't know whether it is a false flag operation or was or not. The one thing I do know is that after the unequivocal statements from Pakistan that this was indeed a false flag tactic by India, that we need to run this to ground and investigate it and find out absolutely for sure one way or the other. I mean, this is a vitally important issue to everyone involved. This conflict could have escalated into an incredibly dangerous circumstance, and the peaceful nations of the world have an obligation to ascertain who's responsible for this occurring.
Now, of course, Congressman, it will be probably impossible to prove one way or the other if indeed it was a false flag operation. But on the assumption then, as per Pakistan's very public accusation that it was indeed an operation run by the intelligence services of India, the implications of this are pretty serious. Of course, we're talking about a government running out of control, running out of accountability, not just to its own people, but to the wider global community at large. In your opinion, what are the implications if it was ever proved it was indeed a false flag operation?
Well, I think the implications are profound. It would undermine the legitimacy of the Hindu government of India. I mean, it would be a very, very serious thing if they are indeed involved in some type of false flag to kind of create this kind of a conflict. That's a terrible thing to do. And I just don't know. But you asked what the implications would be if that were the case. You know, India and Pakistan are two of the 9 nuclear nations of the world that, again, are armed with nuclear weapons. And it's almost impossible to overstate the seriousness of any nation using nuclear weapons in this day and age. Now, I don't think we were, on the precipice of seeing a nuclear exchange between India and Pakistan, but such a precedent would have such far-reaching implications for the peace and security of the whole world. And the fever pitch that's currently across the world, if nations anywhere start throwing nuclear weapons at each other, it could truly launch all of humanity into a new and dangerous age that none of us wants. And, I served on the Strategic Nuclear Forces Committee in Congress for 15 years, and we had a saying that one nuclear warhead landing in your backyard can ruin your whole day. And we just can't let that happen. So whatever Pakistan's evidence is for any kind of a false flag operation here, that has to be something that we examine clearly, and we have to run it to ground. Again, we have to, the truth is what we're really after, nothing more, nothing less, and it's vital that we get to the bottom of it because, again, the implications here, the word you used, were profound.
Indeed. And in fact, President Clinton back in 2000, if I recall, he did confide in a journalist at the time who asked him a specific question. Of course, India, Pakistan, both nuclear powers. He was asked his opinion on should India, Pakistan go full scale, what could potentially happen. And he did say at the time he believed that the India-Pakistan conflict had the most likelihood of all the conflicts around the world, should it ever get to that point, of generating nuclear Armageddon. So, of course, the stakes, as you rightly point out, are extreme here. But with that in mind, and notwithstanding the Pahalgam situation, do you think, in your opinion, Narendra Modi intended, when he launched this attack on Pakistan, do you think he was looking for an all-out war, even a conventional war, or do you think there was an element of gesturing involved?
Well, I have to suggest to you that if Mr. Modi was trying to catalyze a nuclear exchange or a nuclear war, he's out of his mind. I hope that was not his intention, and I don't think it was. But that's in some ways not the point. The point is that if indeed someone deliberately on either side catalyzed this situation from an official point of view, it had the potential of doing just that, of catalyzing a nuclear exchange. And as I said a moment ago, I think we've almost forgotten our history. When America dropped one warhead on Hiroshima and then one on Nagasaki, it was such a profound paradigm shift in warfare that it frightened the whole world. I mean, we were all in a brand new paradigm of existence. And so I would just say to you that whatever Mr. Modi's intentions were there, whatever Mr. Sharif's intentions were there, we have to help all sides understand the significance and the implications of such a situation. If they're with being a nuclear armed nation, there are new responsibilities that come, and you cannot casually instigate any kind of a conflict that has the potential for escalation.
Indeed, of course, the concept of mutually assured destruction is hopefully the one thing that prevents anybody from pushing that button. Now, interestingly, yes, I thought the White House reaction when this first really kicked off, the White House reaction I found was quite interesting, because President Trump quite publicly said, it's none of our business. We do not want to get involved. We'll leave them to it. So he actually was quite dismissive on the surface. But as I think we've all learnt about President Trump, he does say one thing, but you have to judge him by what he actually does, what his actions are. And it does appear that President Trump was directly involved, at least his administration were directly involved in brokering a ceasefire. What do you think went on behind the scenes, and what, in your opinion, was going through Donald Trump's mind?
Well, first of all, President Trump was indeed directly involved in brokering this ceasefire. I mean, he was intelligent enough when he spoke to it publicly prior to really engaging behind the scenes that he said, well, it's not America's direct oversight or business here. I think he was trying to be diplomatic and not try to assign any culpability to either side, so that he had the credibility to be able to speak to both sides. And he announced that after a long night of negotiation that an agreement had been reached. And I have to say to you, this is a significant thing. Pakistan's Prime Minister Sharif has directly thanked the president and other top officials, Marco Rubio and others, for their involvement in brokering this ceasefire. And again, I think the president handled it extremely well. He was, wise enough to articulate very circumspectly, publicly, but he was all the time working behind the scenes to broker this ceasefire. And I have to tell you, Angus, I think if something like this had happened under the Biden administration, I'm afraid the situation would be far more ominous than it is at this moment. And the world really, owes Donald Trump a debt of thanks for being directly involved in this. He has an enormous, influence and capability, and he used it to a very good end here. And I'm grateful to him, and so should the rest of the world be.
Indeed, absolutely so. And with that in mind, if we look at the bigger picture and the long-term game of that region, of course, the dynamics in that whole area are extremely complex. There's a lot of history. And there's a lot of interesting alliances, let's call it. And of course, China is that great, that belligerent power just north of the borders of both countries. And of course, China has very ambitious aspirations globally, not just regionally. And China has built I would say, a good relationship with Pakistan, because Pakistan, through simple commercial basis as well as strategic basis, provides access for China to the Indian Ocean. So China has closed this alliance with Pakistan to build this commercial corridor down to the Indian Ocean. But in turn, therefore, that does imply that Pakistan is related more closely to China, whereas India, by default, or by alternative argument then, is more aligned to the West. Yet, unfortunately, we do not see Narendra Modi trying to clearly align with the West. He's playing all sides against each other. He has very good and strong relations with Moscow. But at the same time, Donald Trump and the American administration are trying to court him as a potential regional ally. So, as I explained, the dynamics are very, very complex. What is your take on that region? What do you think President Trump should be doing here?
Well, first of all, you ask a very cogent, very incredibly important question, and there's just a lot to it, a lot of aspects to it, Angus, but let me take a shot at it. First of all, and it hurts my heart to say it, but across the decades, India has often tried to do as you say, and that's to play both sides. And India, has really over the years tried to align itself with whichever group it thought was politically expedient at the time. And the truth is that yes, Pakistan and China have some pretty close connections right now, but you also were correct in that the economic connections there have transcended some of the political ones. For instance, another nation that I'm very much in favor of, and that is Israel. Some of their weapons are implicated in this attack against Pakistan. But the truth is, Pakistan and Israel have great reasons to try to come together and to work together, because there's a lot of common ground that these two countries should and I hope will eventually have. China is, in my judgment, one of the most dangerous world powers and opponents to the United States and the peace of humanity in general in the whole world. Their GDP is now 90% of America's, and they are bent on world domination. And the entire planet has to recognize that the Chinese Communist power is one of the most malicious and evil enemies of human freedom in this entire world. With that said, I don't think that Israel, for instance, was inclined to be part of attacking Pakistan, nor do I think that that Pakistan was representing China against India. As you say, these are complicated alliances, and again, mostly connected to economic issues. But it's important now, for India especially, to get off the fence and either be with America or be with Russia and China, because those lines are fairly clearly drawn now, and it's important that China stops equivocating and vacillating and trying to play the sides against each other, and stand for something that is truly committed to human freedom in the world. They have not done that, and their internal commitments to human freedom are in great question, in my judgment. They have, in many ways, been totally ignored some of the religious freedom of some of their own people, and they just need to stand up and stand for the cause of human freedom in the world, instead of, again, vacillating back and forth in these kind of semi-political alliances that are not really based on anything foundational.
And if I may, I just want to go slightly off topic here, but you touched on a very interesting point, which I would actually like to explore at least just for a minute or so. And you talked about the contrast between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. One thing that has become very clear with the Trump administration, he always plays a long game. He plays a very good game of chess. And it has become apparent, certainly to those who see what he's doing, and is clearly blinded to those, particularly his critics, who cannot see the game he's playing. But he is clearly understanding the danger that China is posing in the longer term. So a lot of his policies, a lot of his strategic actions are putting the right pieces into place. And by this, for example, I'll talk about Greenland. And the Atlantic Passage. He wants more control over Greenland to get more control over that passage through the Northern Atlantic. As just one example of many things that he is doing, is that he is trying to put the Western pieces in place ready for that one time, God forbid, in the future, that China does eventually become overtly aggressive. Do you think that is exactly what Donald Trump is doing, or do you think there's a lot of luck and flying by the seat of the pants, as his critics would say?
No, I truly agree with what you've said. I think Donald Trump does know what he's doing. You know, I've had the privilege of being in the same room with Donald Trump many times. I consider him a friend, and I know sometimes he doesn't speak perfect diplomat. But the truth is that if you really know him in private, sometimes opposed to his her persona in public, you see that this man really is ahead of the world in some significant ways. And he understands the danger of the CCP. And, this recent advance that he's made related to tariffs. For once now, China and America are going to be far more on even ground economically in terms of trade. And that was vital because China, exports everything they build, and we're the biggest importer, the United States is, in the whole world. And we have every good interest in making sure that we have fair trade. And I think Donald Trump has had the courage, again, in stark contrast to the Biden administration, he's had the courage to stand up to China and say, okay, we're going to demand fairness here. And I think that shows a tremendous insight on his part. Ultimately, the entire human family, Angus, we have to ask ourselves, do we as a family of man, do we seek the cause of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone, or don't we? There are some distinct differences between the communist, the Chinese Communist Party, their ideals, and the America ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are different ideals. In other words, one says that human beings have certain God-given rights, and the other one says that human beings are just pawns of the state. And so let me suggest to you that it's important for everyone listening on every side to say it's time that we recognize these foundational God-given human rights. And when countries like China and when countries even like India are not recognizing those things, the world needs to stand up and say, no, we're going to call you to task on it.
Indeed. And following that same note, but bringing it back on topic between Pakistan and India, of course, this isn't the first time that they've come to blows, literal physical blows between the two nations. Fortunately, they have both very rapidly taken the step back after the peace was brokered. Ultimately, though, the question will remain, do you think the peace will last? Do you think we're going to be in this same situation again?
Well, you have a habit of asking pretty pointed questions. The truth is that the dispute over Kashmir has been a long-standing and almost impossible challenge to mediate. And until some long-term solution is reached, I'm afraid the tensions will continue to be present and that peace will be tenuous at best. So I think, while we're grateful to Donald Trump and while we're grateful to everyone involved that had a part in bringing this potential crisis to a safe end or a safer end, the truth is there's still some unresolved issues there, and I think it's important that we kind of drill down and get in the weeds and try to fix these things so that we can prevent some of these very dangerous potential challenges from occurring in the future.
Indeed, and it does appear, certainly, as I say, there's a sense of déjà vu here. Here we go again. Do you think that this is a wound that will never heal? Do you think there is an obligation now, not just on India and Pakistan, but maybe the global community, and particularly the G20? Do you think there is an obligation on them to find a much more secure, longer-term, permanent solution to this problem?
Well, I do believe, I guess I'm always going to be optimistic to some degree. It's not nations that make peace with each other, it's people that make peace with each other. And sometimes we have to be able to look at each other as equals and say, okay, what's happened in the past, what injustices have occurred, and that if our commitment is to equal justice and equal rights for everyone, whether it be in terms of freedom of religion or a free association or just freedom in general, if we look to try to give everyone a chance to lay hold on the miracle of life and to live according to what they believe that their call of God to live on this earth, then I think we have a chance to come together as a family, as a human family. And I think that will then blur the demarcations between nations and allow the nations to be more officially come together. So I have hopes that there's, at least a potential for peace in the future. We have to always look at it that way, and I hope we just keep trying. I, for one, will do my best.
Of course, and in terms of actual practical solutions, certainly one idea that we've talked a lot about on our Perspectives show is the concept of a DMZ, a demilitarized zone. And of course, in the 1950s, at the end of the Korean War between North and South, those proxy wars, the peace that finally came was really brought about and has perpetuated after the establishment of a DMZ, this barrier, this sort of no man's land between the two nations, which essentially forcibly separated the two warring armies. Do you think there is an argument to stretch and establish a DMZ between India and Pakistan all the way from, let's say, the north in Ladakh, the Chinese border, all the way down to the Indian Ocean? And do you think that could be an effective solution to keep these two perennially warring nations apart?
Well, I believe that you can't ignore the fact that the DMZ between North and South Korea has played a role in keeping some peace in that area. There's no question about it. And I think that it's something that we should examine in this situation as well. But I guess it's important to remember, I think it's been close to 60 years now where we've had the DMZ, and we have not been able to actually create actual peace. We've just been able to keep the recalcitrants or the players in a safer format. But I do think it's worth considering. But ultimately, we have to try to solve the foundational problems. In the meantime, a DMZ I think might be a good potential interim solution. But we have to be able to solve the basic problems. We have to be able, North Korea is still committed to this communist police state that has no real value for the individual human being that's a child of God. And South Korea, of course, is of another persuasion that's much more closely aligned with an American ideal of everyone is created equal by God. Those are conflicts that have to be eventually solved. And then there would be no need for a DMZ. But in the meantime, we have to do the best we can in human terms to try to keep the peace till something better can come.
Which actually is quite an interesting conclusion, because it therefore does actually reflect the situation between Pakistan and India, where of course they are deeply culturally divided by religion, by culture, and they have very different worldviews as two different nations. And therefore a DMZ would work practically in terms of keeping them apart militarily, but then doesn't solve the cultural issue, that wound that will never heal between the two. Therefore, do you think there is an argument to establish let's say, a wider geographical zone, indeed a new nation? Of course, I'm referring to Kalistan, that would form a buffer zone between the two countries. It would be a relatively narrow strip of a nation stretching from the north in China down to the Indian Ocean. It would be governed under Sikh philosophy. It would, of course, be neutral. It would be both friendly to Pakistan. It would be friendly to India. And of course, it would allow free flow of human beings to and fro. But of course, it still forms that impenetrable barrier to militaries from both sides. Do you think that could be a realistic option? And if so, do you think the international community would and should support it?
Well, Angus, as you probably know from my past record, that I believe that the Sikh people were defrauded of their homeland when the partition between India and Pakistan occurred. And I am solidly on record as deeply believing that the establishment of the independent nation of Khalistan would not only be in the interest of human justice, but it would also potentially be an instrument in helping bring peace throughout the region. And ironically, we were just talking about how to deal with the more foundational issues, the differences that create the need for a separation. But if there was a Kalistan that was established that reflected the Sikh perspective of respecting all religions and everyone involved. The Sikh people have a commitment to religious freedom, and I think indeed they could be a tremendous buffer, and eventually maybe the world would recognize the importance of recognizing the religious freedom of one another. That we true tolerance is not pretending we have no differences. True tolerance is being kind and decent to each other in spite of our differences. And I think that the nation of Kalistan is built on a concept that is dedicated to peace and freedom for all. And so, yes, I think it's an interesting concept that you bring up. And not only could it perhaps be an interim DMZ, as it were, but it also might ultimately be able to catalyze the real solution, which is treating people like children of God and doing what we could to support the freedom of everyone to believe as they choose, as long as we don't hurt each other, to live and let live, and to try to somehow find our way through this miracle called life.
Indeed, a very profound way to end the interview. But Congressman Franks, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us once again.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Angus. You take care, my friend.
And thank you for watching this Satellite TV special. We will see you next time.